Capture the passion.
Welcome back to CPTP Season 4, Episode 2. Today we have a very special guest, Ms. Claudia Romo. She's a counselor here at Rio Hondo. Claudia, tell us about yourself.
Thank you. My name is Claudia Romo. I'm a counselor here at Rio Hondo College. I've been here close to 14 years, and I work with students from all majors, and I help them find their pathway from career exploration all the way to transferring to a four-year institution.
Nice. 14 years you've been here.
Yes.
Wow, that's a long time to be here. Has there anything been challenging for you working with students? Because I'm sure you get different age, different demographic, different background, different experiences. Any challenges working with adults?
I don't think that I see them as challenges. I think that it's more of getting to know the individual, figuring out what they're truly looking for. And sometimes you have to ask these probing questions to get to the end of it and realize, okay, so what's the end goal? What are you really looking for? And then we can go ahead and map out their journey from Rio Hondo College, either into the workforce or into a four-year institution, or sometimes both. Yeah. So it's very exciting. It's exciting to be part of the higher education committee and helping students within our community reach their goals in a timely and efficient manner.
I think you bring up a very important question is, what do you want to do? I think a lot of times in different cultures is the expectation of, this is what we want you to do. But when you ask them, what do you want to do? What kind of answers do you get?
So in the beginning, you'll have students, they'll state one major and say, for example, they'll say nursing. And then after talking with them, they'll throw something like, I've always found like this mechanical engineering really interesting. Well, tell me more about that. And what made you kind of explore mechanical engineering? And then you start asking them more questions and you realize that, nursing may not be where their passion stands, and they see themselves in the future doing something else. And so we need to have a conversation about, well, what if we get you to that plan B first? Let's try that. And so we take it from there. So it depends.
Yeah, I continue to reference last season, episode 2 with Victor Soto, who talks about success not being linear. And I love the way that you are open for that. It doesn't have to be the same route. And in our previous episode, we talked about the same thing, that sometimes you think you know what you want, but then you get asked these powerful questions and you're like, well, maybe I want to do something else.
Yes.
How has your career path changed? Has it, or is this was always something you wanted to do?
I fell into counseling accidentally. So it wasn't like, I've always wanted to be a counselor. That wasn't my goal when I was younger. I am a product of community college. I am an adult reentry student. It took me a little bit longer than your traditional student. So I relate a lot to students that take a different route, and I embrace my pathway, and I tell them to embrace theirs. They have to be unique. It's theirs to own. And like mine was mine to own with all the mistakes that I made along the way. And so I happened to go and major in anthropology, and I took all the courses that I could have taken in anthropology, education, and language. And so I have this wealth of background in culture and languages and education. And then when it came to finding a job, I was like, well, what do I want to do now? And nobody asked that question. And so I gravitated back to my community college. I started working there as a classified. And then I started seeing individuals in different roles. And I realized, well, if I want to do that job, what do I need to have? And everybody said, well, you need a master's. And so I quickly researched and I found a university and did a master's in counseling, master's of science in counseling. And then I started doing some adjunct work. And I was of the focus of transfer, because in our community, there's a very low number of individuals that have higher education degrees. And I thought, well, we should do that more. And then I landed at Rio, again, by accident. Just a friend recommended me for a position, and I came into career and technical education. And then that opened up a wide world of not just the four-year pathway, but also the workforce pathway and short-term trainings that lead to high-wage, high-skill jobs. And so I was able to combine both. I still believe students need to get a bachelor's degree. At some point in their lives, they're going to want to be managers, or want to be supervisors, want to move into higher paying positions. And degrees do open up those opportunities and those doors. And so I think that I'm kind of eclectic when it comes to my counseling style. And because I'm a non-traditional student, I know that working sooner and at a livable wage is important to a lot of us, sooner than let me wait until I get the 4-year degree and then a master's degree. So I am aggressive sometimes when I work with students. Okay, what do you want to do? And let's map it out exactly what you need to do to get there. And if there's deviations, then you can come back and you can go ahead and kind of reformulate your pathway. And if you have to step out, there's a possibility that you can get a job within that industry that's going to make you the livable wage that you envision for yourself. So
this advocacy that you have for students to help them find what they want to do, that's powerful. Yes. What has to be your biggest advocacy for students?
I think that now I've always advocated for students that have learning differences. Working in a community college setting, we meet individuals that have different needs. And it's important for us to inform them of our program, Disabled Student Services program, and for them to seek out the accommodations that they need. I think that there is misconceptions in education about individuals with learning differences. I think that sometimes individuals experience negative events during their K through 12 when it comes to being in special education. The title of it, having an IEP, having a 504 plan. Some students feel labeled, and obviously nothing is perfect. Right. And so sometimes when they come, individuals don't disclose, and then they struggle here in our classes. And then further down the road, they may disclose, well, I had a 504 or I had an IEP. And I was like, well, we needed to shift focus right away and get you to that proper service. I think awareness is key. I think now I'm a fiercer advocate for individuals with learning differences because of my own personal experience. I have a daughter that was diagnosed with dyslexia last December. And it was a journey to get to that diagnosis because I'm not a K through 12 educator. Right. And the pandemic was going on. And so everybody just attributed her delays in acquiring the reading and the writing skills to the pandemic. Well,
Zoom.
Yeah.
Online classes.
Yeah. Yes. Yep. It didn't work for anyone. There's so many students behind. And so I think that it was me listening to her teachers that made me hold off a little bit and becoming that fierce advocate. And then my husband's also an educator. And so I went to him and I said, you know what, just listen to what she has to say. And he came through the teacher perspective and he said, I saw my daughter through my teacher eyes and what I was trained to do. And so we just have to work harder with her. Maybe she's just going to pick it up a little slower. What about if we wait and see? And those are some of the common themes that you get in K through 12 right now.
Yes. They're going to catch up. It's not a big deal. It's a pandemic. It's not for everybody. Yes. All these things that sort of shift your attention from your focus into, you know what? No, I see something. And as parents, we have that parent intuition where like, there's something beyond that. But before we jump into that, educate me. Yeah. Learning differences, learning disabilities. Is it the same thing?
I think because there's a negative, it is. But there's a negative connotation when it comes to sometimes a disability, and people have a different perspective.
It's perceived different because I don't want to be labeled with a disability.
It is. Right. And so when you use learning difference, it's a more, to me, it's a more comfortable term. I feel that people can relate, and I think that we're coming into a space where there may be some of us out there that were never diagnosed with a learning difference or we're neurodivergent.
Right.
And we're in a more accepting place right now. And so it's important for us to begin to use those phrases that feel as inclusive to everybody.
I heard a podcast from Dr. Gabor Mate, who he wrote A Myth of Normal. And he talks a lot about trauma. He talks a lot about learning disabilities, how trauma influences and it can possibly impact a learning disability, learning difference. And he says that if we were to look at any spectrum from any disability, where it be cognitive disability specifically, you will see that we will fall into that. And he said, we have to find a way to be better advocates to make sure that we're catching what's contributing to that learning difference.
Right.
As opposed to say, you know what, no, it's not a big deal. It's just wait, it's the pandemic. Blaming everything else instead of focusing into, okay, let me dig deeper into you. So you see your daughter, your husband and yourself, you see your daughter. What was it that gave you that shift or that bulb that lit up that said, you know what, there's something more than just that? What was it?
Yes. There were several early indicators. So in pre-K, she started her first half year, and kids learn their ABCs. They learn short sight words. She never mastered the ABC song. She never mastered the ABCs. She didn't master the sound. So the A for A, the K for C, that never registered in her brain. And so the pandemic hit, we pulled her out of pre-K. Everything is online. She starts kinder online. It's just a minimal amount of time that they spend online. Right. And she still did not grasp the concepts. She didn't understand the blending sounds, even though in my house we have tons and tons of books. We read to them. We listen to podcasts. We listen to audiobooks. We're both educators. Right. You would expect. And so it was frustrating for her and for me because I would sit and do work with her. In the pandemic, all of us turned into teachers. And I was like, okay, so let's learn this. And she's like, okay, it's A, B, C, D, E, F, G. And then she would say it, and halfway through she wouldn't remember. I was like, this is the E. It's the letter of your name. How can you not know it? And so not knowing that her brain was processing things different had some hard times on her because she would cry. Right.
It probably affects your self-esteem too, right? It's saying like, why can't I recognize this letter if it's a letter that's in my name? Exactly. How am I not conceptualizing it?
Yes.
So I'm sure that it was tough to helping her differentiate. It's not that you can't learn. It's maybe there's something else deeper that we're not seeing.
Right. And we didn't get to that place until further down the line. So we worked her hard. Right before they went back to school, we put her in a reading program, intense, for the summer with a private institution, and it did nothing. And then she started first grade, and we talked to the teacher. She's like, all kids are behind, all of them, and we're going to try to catch them up. I was like, yeah, but there's something like different. And I would explain it to people. And because I'm not an educator, a K through 12 educator, like they didn't understand, but you can see her trying to read and decipher a word. And like her brain was processing, and what was coming out wasn't exactly what she wanted to come out. And she would like struggle. Right. And so I would explain that to people and like, well, it's just normal. She's kind of putting things together. She's just more behind than other kids. We'll just wait. And I was like, okay. But in that meantime, I was like, what can we do? So we hired a private tutor through a teacher that has her own business. So we were specific. We want a credentialed teacher, and it has to be a bilingual teacher because she's in dual language. And so she's in a dual language school. We both speak English and Spanish at home. And the issues that we saw in English, we saw them in Spanish right away. Same thing. Could not know the ABCs. The sound connections weren't there. If you would read a book, the Bob books, the cat sat. And then we turned the page. It's like she had never seen those words ever. And we had to start again. Okay, so, trying to get her to remember. Same thing in Spanish. So she did tutoring with a teacher for probably like 9 months. Nothing changed. Nothing. And so we finally, at the end of first grade, I got a SST meeting. And I asked the teacher.
What's an SST?
That's the initial meeting. Yes, student success team. That's the initial meeting that you have with the principal, the school psychologist, the teacher, resource specialist, to talk about issues in the child's education.
So I'm curious, did you push for the SST or did that come out of the school?
It came out of the teacher when she mentioned it. I was like, wait, what is an SST? And when she explained it, I was like, well, I want that. Yes, that's what I want. Now, and my husband's probably not going to be happy with it, but he was against it for the longest time because he was of the perception, I don't want her to be labeled. Right. And so
I think that's one of the biggest fears that is out there in this big misconception about being in special ed.
Right.
It's something that we need to find ways to break that.
Yes.
But please go on.
Yes.
So he wasn't happy.
He wasn't happy. He didn't want her to be labeled. He said, we just have to work harder. We have to try different things. And everything we tried without knowing what it wasn't working. And so summer, again, intensive work, put her in summer school.
This is going into second grade.
This is going into second grade.
Kinder tutoring, first grade tutoring. Now going into second.
Yes, we found a program through one of the Cal States where they have credential teachers that are doing the masters in like reading specialists, and they get to work with students at the conclusion for their field work. Okay. And so we did a semester with them. Very sweet teacher, very knowledgeable, tried her best. And at the end, when we get the report, there's no changes. There's minimal increase. And so there's frustration on the part of the teacher because then she felt she didn't do her job. And we're like, oh, no, it's not that. Prior to that, before the end of that tutoring effort, I spoke to her second grade teacher. The second grade teacher wanted to get to know her, see where she was at. One of the things that sometimes allows students to be passed over or not really
falling through the cracks
is that for girls, they are not class disruptors. They don't get in trouble. They're usually very articulate. They work really hard. And that's my kid. She's very articulate. She will defend her ground. She has a huge vocabulary of words, adult words that you wouldn't expect a child that doesn't know how to read or write.
Right. I was going to ask you that. So as you're going through this, you don't notice anything with her language development, the reception language and the expressive, because like you say, she has a great vocabulary. Yes. She understands things. So where's the frustration?
There's a disconnection, right? Because everywhere we go, but be it a dentist office, a doctor's office, a store, when people talk with her, everybody's like, oh my God, you're so smart. You're going to do great things. I can't wait to see what you do. And they don't know she has a challenge with reading and writing. It's kind of invisible. She loves to talk. She loves to talk. She loves to listen to audiobooks. She loves to listen to podcasts. And that's where she gets her knowledge. Yeah. She will want to listen to ours. And she would want to be part of it as well. She's an advocate for herself now. And we've slowly done that. So by second grade, I finally told my husband, you know what? I'm just going to go ahead and figure this out. I'm done. I'm done. And so I started researching and I found a school psychologist that does assessments privately. And we were going to do the psychoeducational evaluation on our own. We weren't going to wait for the district. The district has been very supportive. They are very kind to us. I have no complaints about that. That's not the case with every single family. Right. In our case, we're happy with what the district has done. But I move in a different speed in everything I do in my life now. And so I could not wait for the processes to take place. And so I found one. We went on a Saturday. And prior to doing the full educational evaluation, the school counselor told me that she had an assessment for dyslexia that was significantly less in cost. I said, well, let's try that one first. Yes. If it doesn't come out that it's dyslexia, we'll do the full psych eval. These costs are pretty large.
Is this all coming out of your pocket?
Out of my pocket, yes. And my husband not knowing.
Now you know.
Not until, we went to it to get it done. We had her evaluated, and as soon as the school counselor came out, she said, there's some sort of processing issue there right away. And so when we got the report, and yes, it's phonological dyslexia, and she's at a kinder reading level when she's already mid-second grade. Yeah. And so there's been growth, but again, I work at a different speed, and minimal growth is not enough for me. I know everybody tells me, oh, it's great. I just don't feel comfortable with the minimal growth. And so when I had the SST meeting with the district in early December, they were talking about how great she is. She's an advocate for students. She's in student council. They voted for her to put me in student council. She talks her way through everything. She's such a hard worker. she tries really hard, and then they're just giving her so many praises, and she's a great kid. And I told him, you know what, I appreciate that you say that, but I think we need to shift the conversation now. We've had her evaluated privately, and the outcome is dyslexia. And that quickly shifted the SST team meeting to the teacher saying, oh, I know what accommodations I need to use. I've been using some with her. They seem to be working. Let's add some more accommodations. We didn't even have a 504. Shifted really quickly to get her evaluated. We had an IEP by January, which is unheard of based on other families that I've spoken
From
with.
December to January, yes, that's huge. Usually,
Yes.
in bigger school districts, it was earlier this year. I think it was anywhere from 10 to 14 months wait period. You waited within a month over the winter break, and you were able to.
They assessed her quickly. We had the IEP meeting, I think, in February, and she was getting the support services that she needed right into that second term of the second grade. There has been some increase in the reading levels. It's not as significant. Right. And so we started looking at private tutors. And I think that's one of the areas that both my husband and myself realized they're almost non-existent in our community. Right. All of them are in the surrounding higher income communities. And the cost for a private tutor is enormous. Right. And so it depends from an educational therapist all the way to an EDD individual, and these sessions in the hundreds. And so we're privileged to be educators. We're not privileged to be of that income. There are schools specifically for kids with dyslexia and other learning differences. It's completely out of our price range. And so we appreciate what the school is doing, but as educators ourselves, we know that we need to do more for our child. And so I told my husband, well, you're an educator. And there's these theories of different systems that work for kids with dyslexia. And there's trainings. I said, you're going to be her tutor. Right, yeah. And so it was just like, oh. And so in December, we researched the trainings that would start as soon as possible. We looked at different institutions that offered the training specifically for individuals with dyslexia, the first level, the intro one. And we found one that started at the end of January. We quickly were able to enroll my husband. It had already closed, but he did like this personal statement and added, it's my daughter. I'm a teacher. I've been doing this for 12 years. This comes as a surprise to me. And they squeezed him into this cohort. Yeah. And so he did this training and finished in May, the courses. And now he's in the practicum. So it has a practicum about 6 months. So he's in the third month now with her, and my daughter's his case study. And so we've seen a difference in the way she's grasping knowledge, and how she all of a sudden driving around, she'll say like, oh, it says welcome there. We're like, oh, what? Did you read it? Yeah. And so my husband's now very motivated to continue in the professional development in the area of dyslexia and other learning differences, because it would also benefit his class. He's a elementary school teacher. Yeah. And it's
a win-win.
It is. And it was more cost effective for us to get him trained than to hire a professional. And they're very good, very knowledgeable individuals. It's just the price range.
Yeah. And sometimes I think for a lot of families that can be discouraging.
Yeah, absolutely.
Where it's like, you know what? Unfortunately, I don't have the means to do it, so let me just wait on the school district, go with what the teacher's saying, and eventually their child can fall through those cracks. Yeah. Successful story that your child, because of your advocacy, you were not going to fall through the cracks. Thank you for sharing that. No, and I'm sure
hopefully not.
Like we said, it's a win-win for your husband, for the entire family. Now your daughter has this huge support system at home, right? And you can continue to advocate as she goes on. Yes. Right? So you guys better be ready for her. So now tell us what you do in your profession here. How do you advocate for students here at the college that have those learning differences?
I think it's making sure that I provide a comfortable environment when we're chatting, so they can disclose that they had an IEP or a 504.
You think it's difficult for them to disclose?
I think it is. I think individuals probably have had negative experiences in K-12, even in our families, right? Because it's very common in a Latino family that they say, no, él es el burrito.
There's always a burro.
He wasn't very good, always. And so we don't know if that's the result of a learning difference.
Right.
And
Yeah.
so,
Right. And that's
and it gets
culturally-
internalized. Right.
Culturally, that's another thing that I think, speaking from my Mexican traditional cultural
Right.
family, if we had any learning disability that wasn't diagnosed,
Right.
we were just told that we were dumb.
Yes.
We were just told that we weren't good enough or we're
Right.
not smart enough, but eventually you'll get it. Or
Right.
you know what, just get through high school and then get a job and then you'll be fine.
Right.
All of that can hamper someone's self-esteem to want to do something with their life. So now if I know that I just can't read this, but you're asking me to disclose that to you
Right.
when my whole family just made fun of me,
Right.
how do I know you're not going to make fun of me?
Exactly.
I'm assuming you build some form of trust with your students.
Yes.
Right? Walk us through that.
Yeah.
So we can have this opportunity to share with everybody that there is trust in that.
Yes, I think all counselors have that and establish that. We're very careful of our interactions with our students and how to make sure that they're comfortable and open up. And then you ask just very, easy questions, and then you pay attention. And I like to pay attention to, if they say, well, I struggled in high school. Well, what does that mean? How did you struggle? And so sometimes I kind of probe it out until they feel comfortable. And they say, well, I had RSP, or I had a 504, or I had IEP. And it's like, oh, thank you for sharing that with me. That is great. We have a great support program that's called Stable Student Services, DSPS. And I'd like to connect you right away with someone so we can start the process of getting the accommodations that you need to be successful.
And that's what it is getting accommodations to the
Right.
students so they can be successful.
Yes.
Because
Yeah.
it can be very challenging.
Mhm.
So I come from, my primary language is Spanish, although I'm not good at it anymore. Was lost as I grew up. But I remember growing up and people talking to me in English, going to school, and just, okay, what are you saying? It sounds like the Snoopy characters, like wah, 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 wah.
Right.
And to me, that's what's processing in my mind. Did I have a learning disability not diagnosed? But if I can go back in time, I'm sure there was some form of learning
Difference.
Difference. Thank you. Yes, learning difference there.
Yes.
So now as adults, when students come to higher ed and they want to be successful, that's why they're here.
Mm-hmm.
But there is a learning difference.
If there is, yes.
If there is, what type of accommodations does the professor have to make for the student to be successful?
So it's going to depend on the student's IEP or
IEP is?
The individualized education plan that they have
That
in high
is
school.
based on the individual,
Based on the
needs,
individual.
right?
The same thing happens. What happens in K through 12, the same thing happens in DSPS. And they'll put together a letter for the instructor to allow the students to have extended time on tests, extended time on work. It just depends. It's going to be unique to each individual.
Right.
But it makes a difference in individuals, academic success. And so some students, and I've met some students that are very resistant, said, you know what, I don't want to be part of something like that anymore. I want to try it on my own.
Do you think it was because of a bad experience, or more of like, you know what, I feel confident, I think I'm getting better at it?
I think that and this student particularly said that I want to do hard classes. I don't want to do easy classes. And so sometimes I think in education, and this is my perspective, nobody else's, sometimes you want to really protect students and be like the guardians and, oh my God,
That's
no. Yes. And not really challenge and push them, even to that level of discomfort. And I think that sometimes that is a negative for students. And sometimes I think that happens a lot with our community, where it's like, oh, pobrecitos, their parents don't know about higher education. Oh, no entienden the school system. Oh, and so that's not who we are.
Right.
We have all these skills and values that we can bring into education to really push forward. And so it's just providing that challenge and then pushing them a little to discomfort and being there to support. And that's where those accommodations come into play.
And the way you're pushing them, you're not pushing them to fail.
No.
You're not pushing them above their ability. You're pushing them to challenge themselves to get better.
Right.
To be able to say, hey, you know what? I can totally do this.
Yes.
Can a professor say, no, I'm not going to accommodate to that?
No.
Tell us why.
That's the law.
That's the law.
That's the law.
Thank you. That's the law. That protects us.
Yes.
Or anyone that can relate and can resonate with this conversation, and you feel that, you know what, maybe I should. And the professor has to do it because that is the law to protect you.
They have to be ADA compliant at work as well.
Right.
So, but if an individual doesn't feel safe in disclosing, then that compliancy isn't going to take place, and it's going to affect their performance.
So I can say, hey, you know what? I have a learning difference. I need more time in my exams. But the student hasn't gone through DSPS.
Yes.
Then
that doesn't work.
The professor can decline.
Yes.
So you need to have
You need to go through it, yes. Okay. And DSPS provides additional support. They have specific workshops, they have tutors, they have labs available, they have their own counselors. It's a comprehensive support service. And then they have connections with outside agencies that help individuals as well. So transitioning not only to a 4-year, but into the workforce. And if they're not aware of it, then they're going to continue to struggle. It's important for educators to be aware of it. And I know that we have a lot on our plate. And maybe because now I'm really in deep with learning differences that I'm more sensitive to it. But I think if we're able to spread the message, at least they'll have something in I think I remember something about, learning differences and something about ADA compliance and being in, getting those accommodations. Definitely. Then hopefully it'll change the outcome.
So here's a question that I'm sure most of us would want to know. How much does it cost?
What costs? Being part of DSPS? Nothing.
Hold on. Tell us again.
Free.
How much does it cost?
It's free.
It's free,
yes.
Right?
It's a support
all these resources,
service.
Tutors, workshops, it's free.
Yes. And they're a part of our campus, so they can access all other support services as well. So we are here to help them succeed, and there's so many tools available. We just need individuals to feel comfortable enough to share that information.
So if I come to DSPS and I get an IEP, my professors are aware of it. They have to make those accommodations for me, not to make it easier on me, but just to help me with my learning differences, to be successful.
Right.
I can get a tutor and not pay for anything. I can get extra help and not pay any additional costs.
We have multiple tutoring support services here on campus. So all students, not just DSPS students, would be able to access those resources. So we have a Readers Writers Center, we have Math Tutoring Center, we have a MESA program for those pursuing engineering, we have our Learning Assistance Center. It's just across campus. It's important for students to know all the support services that are on campus and utilize them, all of them, be active in pursuing those.
How do I find these services? Where do I go?
So website would be the easiest place to go in the search box. They can just put student support services, and it gives them a whole list of everything that our campus has to offer.
What we're going to do is we're going to put that link.
That'll be great.
On our comments right below, so students can access that. Now, here's another question. Let's say I'm not a Rio Hondo student. Do all colleges, universities, do they all have a department that can provide services?
Yes, just like K through 12s do. All institutions of higher education have a DSPS equivalent. They may name it differently, but they do have it. Smaller for-profit colleges, I'm not aware. I'm not sure, but public and the private institutions that are regionally accredited will have a DSPS program.
And I think the accreditation has a lot to do with it. Don't quote me on that, but I'm sure that has a lot to do with it. For the college to be accredited, they have to provide that type of service.
Right.
I'm curious to know, do you think our culture has a lot to do with not wanting or not knowing how to ask for help? In other words, again, I'm the burro in my family. I don't know how to go and ask for help. One, because I'm afraid. Two, because I don't want people to know about it. How do we break that barrier with students to help them see that, you know what, despite what your culture told you, despite what you believe, I want you to be successful?
I think it's more complex than that. I think for a lot of us that have immigrant parents, they see education and value those educators' perspectives. And so whatever that educator says is a go, right? And so they don't want to be disrespectful. And then as we continue to see within our culture, they may not want to disclose because it is frowned upon to be different. I think we're lucky that we're in an era where we accept everything and there's more inclusive talk. We're more open to it. I think that there's still a lot of work to be done within the Latino community. I think that we need to bring together more professionals that look like us, that have similar experiences to us, to offer these support services at a lower cost, if not free. It was really disheartening to see that I could not get a tutor for my kid quickly enough because there was none in my nobody in Whittier, nobody in the southeast of Los Angeles County. I mean, it was as far as Irvine, Pasadena, Rancho Cucamonga, and it was limited, right? So you go through these lists of these organizations that vetted these tutors, and they're nowhere near my community. And so it's disheartening to see that. It also is unequal, and having the right to read, I think it's a civil rights thing. And so it leads to two things, right? A good outcome or a negative outcome. There's a lot of individuals in our prison system that have a learning difference. About 50% may have dyslexia, and it could have been undiagnosed. And so it's different for males and females in the classroom, because like my kid, she's a stellar student. You know, everybody loves her. She's so great. But there may be a kid that's acting out because that's the way they're acting out because they can't, you know. And we did this awesome, and if you ever get the chance to do it, it's a simulation to really put yourself in the shoes of a child that has dyslexia. And it's not the inability to be able to put together the words in that sentence. It's that frustration that you're trying to figure out, and then there's a teacher asking you, well, why can't you read it out loud? Can you hurry up? Let's skip over you. So you add these, and it's unintentional, right? It's unintentional.
Because I don't even know what's going on. It's there. I just don't know how to get it out.
Right.
To be able to say, you know, it's you triggered me with that. What you were saying takes me back to my first grade experience. I don't think if I went to kinder, it must have been for a couple of days. But I remember first grade, being an immigrant myself from Mexico, not knowing the language, and the teacher treating me that exact same way. Again, I have no idea what she was saying. I can only assume that she wanted me to read something because she would point at it. She'd give me this frown look and point at it again, and very harsh tone, where I'm like, in my mind, it's like, dude, I don't even know what you're talking about. I don't even know what this says. If I can't understand you, how am I supposed to understand this? That's going inside of me.
Yes, it is.
Right? I'm building this big disconnection and this big distrust with teachers that's supposed to be my advocates. Right. So now, let's just happen to say, I see my daughters going through that. And I'm going to be reluctant to have them go through special ed because of the experience that I had.
Right.
So we sort of built this cycle of stigma towards IEPs, 504s, because I don't want my child going through that.
Right.
So what can you tell parents out there, or even students that have a diagnosed learning difference? What would you tell them to feel comfortable about their difference to be able to be successful academically?
I think for parents is to go with your gut. If you see something in both languages, and any language, dyslexia is across the world. It's not just English speaking or Spanish speaking kids, everywhere. It's to go with your gut. If it feels different, if it feels weird, there's no wrong in asking the questions. You may not get the answer that you want, and I tell this to students as well. Then you go find somebody else, right? And so that's the resilience I think that sometimes our culture doesn't really embrace, but we have it. It's part of who we are. And then to also be empathetic and to be understanding. And I think in the beginning, we weren't so empathetic with my daughter because we drilled her and we pounded it. And there was a lot of crying moments, and that hurts us. It really does hurt us. And I think she's forgotten those moments, but we're never going to forget them because we had no idea that our brain couldn't process that. And we're like, how can you not know your ABCs? You're in second grade. This is not right. Until you understand, like, oh, her brain is just different.
You said play that as simulation, and you say like, it's something beyond that. It's not that you're being defiant, you're not being difficult. There's something there.
Right. There's something there, and sometimes you have to bring it down and have a face-to-face with an educator, a principal, your SST team, and let them know that there's something there, and it needs to be looked into a little bit further.
Did you have, curious, did you have a gut feeling when you were drilling your daughter about not learning the things? Was there something in you that like, there has to be something else? Or was it more of like just the expectation that you had academically for her?
I think that we do push our kids to high level. Mm-hmm. I think that after the reading intensive program that we paid for, and nothing came out of it, I figured something else is going on. But it's different because she's our little one, and then we have an oldest one who reads 2 grades above her grade level, who had no problem, right? Who's a great writer, and she just easily reads books. So we were like, what's this? Yeah. I didn't have to do nothing with this one, and this one I have to do a lot more. And I think that listening to the child as well, I think that in the beginning I didn't listen as much. Breaks my heart to say that. But I listen to her now. And she's very, and sometimes you'll learn about individuals with dyslexia. She's very sensitive. She's very articulate. She knows when things aren't right or wrong. And so when she tells us something isn't right, then we know she's telling us the truth. Yeah. And we believe her and we reinforce it. And I think that's building her self-esteem. Yes. I think the learning difference part, and it's hard for individuals, especially younger ones, is to embrace it. It's part of who you are. We're all unique. We're all different, and that makes us. What makes us us. Exactly. And so embracing it, you turn it into your strength is what's key. And so being comfortable with who you are, being comfortable knowing that there is a difference and it's not bad, and that you have all these other assets and strengths. Sometimes, and I don't know what it's called, you probably know, but we go more on the lacking of skills or the lack of strengths, when we're supposed to be supporting all those strengths and values and skills that an individual has, and really strengthen that, because then this will come later. It's like strength-based theory, right? Yeah, strength-based, yes. Yeah.
Using your weaknesses as your superpowers.
Right, and we're really working towards it, yeah.
So let me ask you this. Yes. Is it certain IEPs you can test out, right? Dyslexia, is this lifelong?
It is lifelong. So she will need accommodations her entire life. We have been very and it's a short time. So there are parents out there that have become professionals, educators, are part of large organizations. We're part of a couple of organizations. We're kind of getting our foot in the door. We first want to help our kid before we go out and help our community. We need to get her on track before we fully commit to helping our community. But we're already there in 3 different organizations, and I forgot where we were going with it.
Is it lifelong?
It is lifelong. There's different levels of the training that you have to do. There's different efforts and techniques that are used with kids in K through 5th, and then middle school and high school, and then in college as well. Those accommodations are going to be lifelong. There's a lot of free ones through Microsoft, through Google. We've been exploring doing some free online training for them. They're open for teachers, parents, they're open for everybody. There's accommodations on your cell phone. There's, if you're familiar with Immersive Reader, you can make the font bigger, you can spread the letters, you can highlight, you can underline, you can hear the word read to you.
Now that you bring that up, let me jump in real quick. I work at Cal State LA, and in touch with, it's always the Office of Students with Disabilities. Through one of the conversations was text needs to be available via PDF.
Right.
What they call it, ebook. And when I saw that, I was like, this is so cool, because the first thing that I thought of, not everybody can be successful with just reading the hard book. Right. So now if you have it on an electronic device, it's a more resources for us.
Yes.
To help you be successful.
Yes.
Like you're talking about.
Yes. Yes.
So I appreciate you with this, bringing us
you.
into this huge insight of dyslexia. I appreciate you being a huge advocate.
Thank you.
Keep going. You need some help out there. And we have all of our audience out there to continue to advocate for your daughter. Shout out to her.
Yeah.
I'm curious to know if there's one thing that you would want our audience that can relate and resonate with this, what would that advice be?
It's just to keep moving forward. The words of my dad throughout his whole life experience here in the United States is, hay que echarle ganas. No queda de otra. No queda de otra. And I think that's my motto. That's my kids' motto. And we're going to continue to do what we need to do to make sure that she gets the support, but also that we bring it to our community. It's important as educators. This is why we went to school, right? And this is why we're in education. We have to bring it back to the community, and we have to really build that support so we don't have individuals that fall through the cracks. Yeah. We have a lot of brilliant minds in our community. We're going to make a lot of difference.
One here.
Oh, no, thank you.
Thank you so much again for the insight, the knowledge. Really appreciate the work that you do. So everyone, till the next episode, stay safe, stay healthy.
Thank you.
Capture the passion.